You know exactly what to do, but your brain keeps stopping you. This audiobook shows you how to change that. Unlock unstoppable momentum by working with your protective mind, not against it. Trick yourself into action. Audiobook. Introduction. You sit before an important task, one that could meaningfully impact your future. The steps are clear. The time is available. The necessity is obvious. Yet something invisible but powerful holds you back, creating a peculiar paralysis that defies logic. In this moment, you face one of the most puzzling paradoxes of human experience, knowing exactly what to do, yet feeling unable to begin. This gap between intention and action isn't a character flaw or lack of discipline. It's the predictable response of a brain designed primarily for protection, not productivity. Understanding this distinction unlocks the door to consistent action and achievement. Think of your mind as a partnership between a rider and a horse. The rider represents your conscious intentions, the part of you that sets goals, makes plans, and understands what needs to be done. The horse represents your emotional brain, powerful, protective, and primarily concerned with avoiding discomfort. When facing challenging tasks, many try to force the horse forward through sheer willpower, creating an exhausting battle of resistance and reluctance. But there's a different way. Instead of fighting against your brain's protective mechanisms, you can learn to work with them. This book reveals how achievement isn't built on motivation or willpower, but on strategic self-manipulation, ethical techniques for directing your brain's natural tendencies toward productive action. Traditional productivity approaches often fail because they ignore how the mind actually works. They prescribe solutions that sound logical, but clash with our psychological architecture. The result? Short-lived bursts of progress followed by familiar patterns of procrastination and avoidance. This book offers a different path. First, you'll understand the hidden architecture of resistance, why your mind creates such compelling reasons to delay important actions. Then, you'll discover fundamental self-manipulation strategies that honor your brain's needs while guiding it toward productive action. Finally, you'll master advanced techniques for maintaining momentum regardless of emotional state. Through these chapters, you'll recognize that the mental mechanisms currently preventing your progress contain within them the seeds of unstoppable momentum. When you learn to work with your mind's true nature rather than against it. The path to consistent action lies not in forcing yourself forward, but in understanding and redirecting the sophisticated machinery of your mind. You're about to embark on a journey that transforms your relationship with difficult tasks. Instead of battling against yourself, you'll learn to become a masterful rider who understands the horse's concerns and guides it with wisdom and patience. This isn't about becoming superhuman. It's about becoming brilliantly, effectively human by understanding and working with your mind's true nature. Chapter 1. The Protective Mind. You've experienced it countless times. That moment when you're about to take action on something deeply important, something that could transform your life, and suddenly your mind floods with compelling reasons to wait, delay, or abandon the effort entirely. The resistance feels visceral, almost physical in its intensity, creating an invisible wall between you and meaningful action. This isn't random self-sabotage or lack of discipline. Your brain's response to challenging tasks follows a precise evolutionary logic, one that prioritizes protection over progress. When you understand this fundamental design, you begin to see resistance not as your enemy, but as an overprotective guardian doing exactly what it evolved to do. Your brain processes psychological discomfort through the same neural pathways it uses for physical pain. When you face a challenging task, uncertainty, or the possibility of failure, your mind responds as if you're encountering a physical threat. This protection mechanism served our ancestors well, keeping them safely within known territories and familiar behaviors. Today, this same system continues to operate, treating growth opportunities as potential dangers to be avoided. Think of your mind as an overprotective guardian who has created an invisible boundary around your comfort zone. This guardian doesn't distinguish between genuine threats and beneficial challenges. It responds to both with the same protective arsenal: procrastination, distraction, rationalization, and doubt. Each of these responses represents a sophisticated strategy to keep you safely within familiar territory. When you try to push through resistance using willpower alone, you're essentially fighting against your brain's core protective programming. This explains why traditional approaches emphasizing discipline and force of will often fail. They create an adversarial relationship with your own mind, triggering even stronger protective responses. What appears as procrastination might really be your brain's way of preventing potential failure. What feels like lack of motivation could be your mind's attempt to conserve energy for perceived threats. Even your most convincing excuses are actually protection mechanisms designed to maintain emotional safety. This understanding reveals why the common advice to just push through or force yourself often backfires. These approaches ignore the sophisticated nature of your brain's protective responses. The more you fight against these mechanisms, the more energy they consume, creating an exhausting cycle of resistance and force. The key insight isn't to overcome or defeat these protective responses, but to recognize them as valuable feedback. When you feel resistance rising, it's signaling something important about the task ahead. Rather than fighting this signal, you can learn to interpret and work with it. Your brain's protective mechanisms aren't flaws to be fixed, but features to be understood and redirected. This shift in perspective, from seeing resistance as an obstacle to viewing it as useful information, creates the foundation for a completely different approach to taking action. This is why successful action isn't built on motivation or willpower. It's built on understanding and working with your brain's protective nature, rather than fighting against it. When you align your approach with how your mind actually works, you unlock the ability to take consistent action without relying on temporary bursts of motivation or exhausting willpower. The resistance you feel toward important tasks isn't personal failure. It's your brain performing its primary function of protection. Once you truly understand this, you can begin to transform your relationship with difficult tasks, moving from frustration to strategic navigation. This fundamental shift in understanding paves the way for the practical strategies that follow. Because here's the truth about those who consistently take action toward their goals: they aren't more motivated or disciplined than you. They've simply learned to work with their brain's protective mechanisms rather than against them. They recognize that resistance isn't a wall to break through, but a signal to decode. By understanding their mind's protective impulses, they transform what looks like opposition into valuable feedback. While others exhaust themselves fighting against their brain's natural tendencies, these individuals have discovered how to channel these same instincts toward meaningful progress. The difference isn't in their willpower. It's in their relationship with resistance itself. They've learned to interpret their mind's hesitation not as an obstacle, but as intelligence gathering, transforming what initially feels like procrastination into a powerful form of preparation. When resistance arises, they don't immediately launch into battle with their own instincts. Instead, they pause to decode the valuable information hidden within their reluctance, using these insights to chart a more effective path forward. Chapter 2. The Motivation Myth. You sit there waiting for the perfect moment, that magical surge of motivation that will finally make taking action feel effortless and natural. The important task looms before you, and you tell yourself that once you feel truly ready, you'll begin. Yet that moment of readiness remains eternally out of reach, always seeming to hover just beyond tomorrow. This waiting game represents one of the most insidious traps in human psychology. The belief that you need to feel motivated before taking action creates a perfect closed loop of perpetual delay. You wait to feel ready, but that feeling rarely arrives precisely because you're waiting for it. The uncomfortable truth about motivation reveals itself in the actual neuroscience of human behavior. Motivation doesn't precede action, it follows it. Your brain produces motivation-enhancing chemicals like dopamine, not in anticipation of action, but as a reward for taking it. This creates a crucial insight. Waiting to feel motivated before acting is like waiting to feel fit before exercising. The very thing you're waiting for can only emerge from the action itself. Think of motivation as a fair-weather friend who shows up only after you've already begun. Once you're in motion, this friend appears with energy and enthusiasm, making it easier to continue. But relying on their arrival before you start means you'll be waiting indefinitely. This isn't a character flaw or personal failing. It's the predictable operation of your brain's reward systems. Successful people haven't discovered the secret to constant motivation. Instead, they've learned something far more valuable: how to act without requiring the emotional comfort of motivation first. They understand that feeling ready is not a prerequisite for beginning. This insight liberates them from the endless cycle of waiting for the perfect emotional state. Your brain, designed primarily for survival rather than achievement, naturally seeks emotional comfort before difficulty. This made perfect sense in an environment where most challenges were physical threats. But in today's world of complex, long-term goals, this protective mechanism becomes a barrier to progress. The very act of waiting for emotional readiness reinforces your brain's belief that the task must be unsafe, or it would feel easy to begin. The solution lies not in forcing yourself to feel motivated, but in manipulating the amount of energy required to begin. This approach, called activation energy manipulation, focuses exclusively on lowering the threshold for taking the first small action. Instead of trying to generate enough motivation to complete the entire task, you make the beginning so effortless that it requires virtually no emotional resources. This manifests through commitment minimization, reducing the initial commitment to such a tiny action that your brain's protective mechanisms don't activate. When you tell yourself, "I'll just work for 2 minutes," you bypass the resistance that emerges when contemplating the full scope of the task. Those 2 minutes often naturally extend into longer periods once you're in motion, and motivation arrives as a consequence of action. Environmental pre-commitment serves as another powerful tool, where you arrange your environment to make action almost automatic. By removing even small barriers to beginning and creating visible cues that trigger action, you reduce the activation energy required to start. Strategic accountability adds another layer of effectiveness, not through external pressure, but by creating situations where taking action becomes the path of least resistance. This isn't about forcing yourself through willpower, but about structuring your environment and commitments so that beginning feels easier than avoiding. The belief that you should feel motivated before starting creates additional resistance by adding a layer of self-judgment to the existing challenge. This expectation itself becomes another barrier, as you interpret the lack of motivation as a sign that something is wrong. Understanding that motivation naturally follows action frees you from this added psychological burden. Working with your brain's actual tendencies rather than fighting against them creates sustainable momentum. By accepting that motivation comes after action and focusing on lowering activation energy instead of waiting for emotional readiness, you establish a reliable pathway to consistent action, regardless of your initial emotional state. This shift transforms the entire dynamic of difficult tasks. Suddenly, you're swimming with the current of your brain's natural functioning rather than exhausting yourself by swimming upstream. Your energy goes into intelligent navigation rather than brute force resistance, allowing you to maintain momentum even through challenging periods. The brain's protective mechanisms become allies in your journey rather than obstacles to overcome through sheer willpower. Chapter 3: The Discomfort Paradox. You know the moment well, that instinctive flinch away from discomfort, the almost automatic reach for your phone, the sudden urge to clean your workspace, or the convincing voice that suggests now isn't the right time. These aren't random occurrences, but a sophisticated pattern of avoidance your mind has perfected over years of protecting you from psychological discomfort. Your attempts to escape uncomfortable feelings create a compounding cycle. The original task remains undone, generating guilt and anxiety. To avoid these negative emotions, you seek more distractions, which temporarily relieve the discomfort but ultimately intensify it. This cycle continues, building layers of resistance that make the original task seem increasingly daunting. This pattern reveals a profound paradox. The more aggressively you try to avoid discomfort, the more it dominates your experience. Like quicksand, every struggle to escape pulls you deeper into the very sensations you're trying to avoid. This isn't because you're doing something wrong. It's because you're following your brain's natural protective instincts in a context where they no longer serve you. Your mind's avoidance mechanisms evolved in an environment where physical threats were common and psychological comfort was a reliable signal of safety. Today, in a world where growth requires voluntary engagement with psychological discomfort, these same protective responses often prevent you from taking actions that would most benefit you. The solution isn't to fight harder against discomfort, but to fundamentally transform your relationship with it. When you resist an uncomfortable feeling, you create a second layer of suffering, discomfort about being uncomfortable. This secondary suffering often causes more distress than the original discomfort you were trying to avoid. Modern psychological research consistently shows that acceptance of discomfort, rather than resistance to it, actually reduces both its intensity and duration. When you stop fighting against uncomfortable feelings, they lose much of their power over your behavior. This isn't merely theoretical. It's a practical pathway to action despite discomfort. Think of discomfort as a smoke alarm. Your current response treats every signal of discomfort as if it were indicating a real fire, triggering an emergency response. But in the context of meaningful work and growth, discomfort is more like the smoke alarm going off while you're cooking, an expected and even necessary part of the process, not a signal to evacuate the building. This understanding opens the door to discomfort reframing, a powerful form of self-manipulation that transforms how you interpret and respond to challenging feelings. The same sensations that currently trigger avoidance can become signals of engagement and progress. The tension in your chest as you face a difficult task isn't a warning to retreat. It's evidence that you're pushing beyond your comfort zone toward growth. Developing this capacity begins with deliberate exposure to manageable amounts of discomfort. Start with brief periods, even just 30 seconds, of intentionally staying with uncomfortable sensations without trying to change or escape them. Notice the physical sensations of resistance, the tightness in your shoulders, the urge to check your phone, the impulse to get up and walk away. Instead of responding to these signals, simply observe them with curiosity. As you practice this awareness, you'll discover something surprising. Discomfort itself isn't nearly as threatening as your anticipation of it. The actual sensation of starting a challenging task is rarely as intense as the discomfort you create by trying to avoid it. This recognition creates space between the sensation of discomfort and your habitual response to it. The language you use shapes this transformation. Replace phrases like, "I can't handle this," or "I need to get rid of this feeling" with, "I'm noticing discomfort," or "This feeling is here while I work." These subtle shifts acknowledge the presence of difficult sensations without treating them as barriers to action. This isn't about resigning yourself to permanent suffering. Instead, it's about recognizing that temporary discomfort is not only survivable but often signals engagement with meaningful activity. The sensation you label as unpleasant is frequently a sign that you're pushing beyond familiar territory, stretching into the space where growth happens. When you treat discomfort as information rather than a warning, you begin to see it as a natural companion to progress. Like the resistance you feel when strengthening a muscle or the mental strain that comes with learning something new. This shift transforms your relationship with challenging moments. The tension in your shoulders while tackling a difficult project, the flutter in your stomach before an important conversation, the mental fog when facing a complex problem. These sensations aren't barriers, but signposts marking your path of growth. They're your body's way of acknowledging that you're engaging with something meaningful, something that matters enough to trigger your protective responses. Chapter 4. The Starting Problem. You face an important task. The materials are ready, the goal is clear, yet hours pass as you find increasingly creative ways to avoid starting. When you finally begin, perhaps driven by an imminent deadline or sheer frustration with yourself, something remarkable happens. The work flows more easily than expected. The resistance that felt overwhelming just moments ago diminishes significantly. This isn't coincidence or luck. It's a fundamental principle of human psychology that reveals a crucial opportunity for self-manipulation. The stark contrast between pre-task resistance and mid-task engagement illuminates a critical truth. Beginning is disproportionately harder than continuing. This principle mirrors the physics concept of activation energy. The initial surge of energy required to start a chemical reaction is far greater than the energy needed to sustain it. Your mind operates under similar constraints. The psychological energy required to initiate action dramatically exceeds the energy needed to maintain it. Think of every task as having a 2-minute bridge you must cross. On one side lies intention, on the other, engagement. This bridge represents the critical transition point where most productive efforts fail. The resistance you feel isn't distributed evenly across the entire task. It's concentrated almost entirely in these first moments of initiation. Understanding this concentration of resistance transforms how you approach difficult tasks. Traditional productivity advice fails precisely because it treats all parts of a task as equally challenging. Complex systems and elaborate techniques target the wrong problem. The real challenge isn't maintaining effort throughout the task. It's crossing that initial threshold between intention and action. Most abandonment happens in this crucial transition, not during task execution. This understanding reveals why waiting to feel ready or motivated is particularly ineffective. Motivation rarely precedes action because the strongest resistance occurs before you begin. The very moment you're waiting for, when starting feels easy, is least likely to arrive when you need it most. The solution lies in developing specific strategies for crossing the initiation threshold with minimal resistance. Rather than trying to generate enough motivation or willpower to overcome this barrier, you can bypass it entirely through strategic self-manipulation. Commitment minimization stands as one of the most powerful initiation techniques. Instead of focusing on the entire task, commit only to the smallest possible first step. This isn't about tricking yourself into doing more. It's about removing the psychological burden of commitment that makes starting so difficult. When you tell yourself you'll work for just 2 minutes, you're not lying or setting up a false premise. You're simply focusing exclusively on crossing the initiation threshold, knowing that continuation becomes significantly easier once you're in motion. Environmental triggers provide another pathway across the initiation threshold by removing decision points. Each decision represents a potential point of failure where resistance can take hold. By pre-deciding exactly when and where you'll take action, you eliminate these vulnerability points. Implementation intentions. Specific plans that link situations to responses capitalize on this principle. Rather than leaving initiation to chance or motivation, you establish precise triggers that bypass conscious resistance. These strategies work because they target the actual point of resistance, rather than trying to generate more willpower or motivation. They acknowledge that your mind's protective mechanisms are strongest during initiation and create pathways around this resistance rather than trying to overpower it. The fear that starting might commit you to more than you can handle often intensifies initiation resistance. This fear creates a mental loop where you feel unable to start because you're focusing on the entire task rather than just the beginning. By separating initiation from continuation, treating them as distinct challenges requiring different strategies, you can address this fear directly. You're not committing to completing the entire task. You're simply committing to beginning. Understanding beginning as harder than continuing revolutionizes how you approach difficult tasks. Instead of trying to generate enough motivation to sustain long periods of work, you can focus your energy precisely where it's needed most, on crossing that critical initiation threshold. This targeted approach makes consistent action possible without requiring massive amounts of willpower or motivation. By directing your attention to the brief but crucial moment of initiation, you transform seemingly insurmountable tasks into manageable challenges. Your brain no longer needs to maintain the exhausting illusion of endless effort. It simply needs to navigate a momentary transition. This shift in perspective changes everything, transforming your relationship with challenging tasks from one of depletion to strategic engagement. When you recognize that the greatest resistance occurs in those first crucial moments, you stop exhausting yourself by trying to maintain high motivation throughout the entire process. Instead, you develop precise strategies for managing brief periods of discomfort, knowing that momentum naturally builds once you're in motion. This more sophisticated understanding of your mind's patterns allows you to work with your natural tendencies rather than constantly fighting against them. Chapter 5. The Focus Fallacy. You sit at your desk, time blocked for focused work, determined to maintain perfect concentration. Within minutes, your mind drifts. A notification catches your attention. A random thought surfaces about an upcoming event. Soon you're battling an internal war between what you should be doing and where your attention naturally wants to go. The harder you try to force focus, the more your mind seems to resist, leaving you frustrated and questioning your capacity for meaningful work. This struggle with concentration isn't evidence of personal failure. It reveals a fundamental misunderstanding about how your brain naturally functions. The entire premise that sustained, unbroken focus is necessary for meaningful achievement is deeply flawed. This misconception creates unnecessary suffering, while ignoring how your mind actually operates most effectively. Your brain naturally oscillates between periods of focused and diffuse attention. This isn't a design flaw. It's an essential feature that enables both concentrated work and creative integration. Neuroscience reveals these attention cycles are hardwired into your brain's operating system. Fighting against these natural rhythms creates mental resistance that impairs rather than enhances your performance. Consider how waves move through water. Each wave has a natural rise and fall, creating a rhythm that carries tremendous power when worked with rather than against. Your attention follows similar patterns. Instead of trying to force a constant state of concentration, like attempting to hold a wave at its peak, you can learn to mentally surf these natural cycles of focus and release. This isn't merely a theory. Studies in cognitive neuroscience demonstrate that the brain's default mode network, active during periods of apparent distraction, plays a crucial role in information processing, creativity, and problem solving. Those moments when your mind seems to wander aren't necessarily lost productivity. They're often essential integration periods your brain requires for deeper understanding. Successful people don't possess superhuman concentration abilities. Instead, they organize their work to accommodate rather than fight against their brain's natural attention patterns. They understand that productivity isn't about maintaining perfect focus, but about strategically navigating the mind's natural rhythms. Think of attention like breathing. You can temporarily force your breathing pattern, but this creates tension and becomes unsustainable. Just as your body naturally alternates between inhale and exhale, your mind naturally cycles between focused and diffuse states. Working with these cycles rather than fighting them allows for sustainable productivity without the exhaustion of constantly forcing concentration. The solution isn't to eliminate distraction, but to incorporate it strategically. Strategic focus manipulation works with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. Instead of demanding unbroken concentration, this approach creates structured rhythms that match your natural attention spans. The key lies in implementing timed work sprints that align with your brain's natural focus cycles. These typically range from 15 to 40 minutes, depending on your individual patterns. By deliberately incorporating brief periods of mental release between these sprints, you prevent the accumulation of resistance that occurs when trying to force sustained focus. Another crucial element is establishing attention anchors, simple practices that create gentle pathways back to your work when your mind inevitably wanders. Rather than harshly redirecting your attention, these anchors provide natural transition points that honor your brain's need for both focus and release. When attention drifts, as it naturally will, the goal isn't to eliminate these shifts, but to navigate them skillfully. This might mean briefly noting where your mind went, then gently returning to your task without self-judgment. Or it could involve quickly capturing a distracting thought on paper so your mind knows it won't be lost, freeing you to return to your primary focus. The pressure to maintain perfect concentration often creates a self-defeating cycle, where anxiety about losing focus actually increases distractibility. By releasing this perfectionist expectation, you reduce the mental resistance that makes concentration difficult in the first place. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about understanding that peaks of focus naturally alternate with periods of mental integration. Your brain's tendency to shift attention isn't a weakness to overcome, but a natural rhythm to work with. By understanding and accommodating these patterns, you can maintain productivity without the exhaustion of constantly forcing focus. This approach honors how your mind actually functions while creating sustainable pathways to meaningful achievement. Chapter 6: The Control Illusion. You're sitting there, trying desperately to focus on your work, but intrusive thoughts keep flooding in. The more intensely you attempt to push away worries about that upcoming presentation or silence the inner critic questioning your abilities, the more persistent these thoughts become. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The harder you push down, the more forcefully it rebounds to the surface. This mental tug-of-war isn't just exhausting, it's counterproductive. Your instinct to suppress unwanted thoughts and feelings seems logical. After all, they're interfering with your focus and productivity. But this approach consistently backfires, creating a paradoxical effect where resistance only strengthens what you're trying to eliminate. Research in psychological science has consistently demonstrated this rebound effect. When you actively try to suppress a thought, your brain must continuously monitor its presence to ensure successful suppression. This monitoring process keeps the unwanted thought active in your mental background, making it more likely to surface with increased intensity once your suppression efforts fatigue. Think of your mind like a flowing river. Attempting to block or dam the flow doesn't stop the water. It merely creates pressure that eventually finds release, often in unexpected and potentially destructive ways. However, understanding the principles of mental judo reveals a more effective approach, redirecting the energy you can't contain. Just as a martial artist learns to use an opponent's momentum rather than directly opposing it, you can learn to work with rather than against your mind's natural movements. This isn't about surrendering to distraction or giving up on focused work. It's about acknowledging mental experiences without struggling against them, allowing their energy to be redirected toward productive channels. When unwanted thoughts arise, attempting to force them away paradoxically ensures their persistence. Instead, brief acknowledgement without engagement allows them to naturally dissipate. This might seem counterintuitive. Surely paying any attention to distracting thoughts will strengthen them. But psychological research shows the opposite. Thoughts that are acknowledged without resistance tend to fade more quickly than those we try to suppress. The key lies in developing psychological flexibility, the ability to remain in contact with the present moment and maintain or change behavior as needed, even in the presence of unwanted thoughts and feelings. This isn't about controlling your mental experience. It's about skillfully directing your attention while allowing your mind to do what minds naturally do. Consider how a skilled sailor doesn't fight against the wind, but instead adjusts their sails to harness its energy, regardless of which way it's blowing. Similarly, you can learn to navigate your mental weather without becoming entangled in futile attempts at control. This approach conserves the mental energy previously spent on suppression, while allowing you to maintain productive engagement even amidst internal turbulence. The practice begins with mental noting, briefly acknowledging thoughts as they arise without engaging in their content. When worried thoughts surface, simply note thinking and gently return attention to your task. When self-doubt appears, note judging and redirect focus to your next action. This creates psychological distance without requiring suppression. Values anchoring provides another powerful redirection tool. When unwanted thoughts threaten to pull you off course, reconnecting with your deeper motivations, why this work matters to you, helps naturally realign attention with what's important. This isn't about forcing focus, but about strengthening your connection to what gives your efforts meaning. The leaves on a stream perspective offers a way to relate differently to mental content. Imagine your thoughts as leaves floating on water. You can observe them pass by without needing to grab them or push them away. This metaphor helps cultivate a more spacious relationship with your mental experience, reducing the impulse to control or eliminate unwanted thoughts. Your mind's tendency to generate thoughts, even unwanted ones, isn't a malfunction to be corrected. It's a feature of how your brain works, one that can be worked with rather than against. The energy of these thoughts, when redirected rather than resisted, can actually support rather than hinder your progress. Like a river's current, mental activity flows continuously. Fighting against it exhausts you, while learning to navigate with it unlocks new possibilities. When you stop viewing your mind's activity as an obstacle and start seeing it as a natural force to be channeled, you transform what feels like interference into a source of momentum. This shift from resistance to collaboration with your own mental processes opens up a more sustainable path forward. Chapter 7. The Environment Effect. You sit down at your workspace with renewed determination. This time will be different. You've made the decision to change, feeling the surge of motivation coursing through you. Yet within days you find yourself drifting back to old patterns, wondering why your ironclad intentions keep dissolving in the face of reality. This cycle is so common, so frustrating, that many conclude they simply lack the discipline or willpower to change. But this conclusion misses a crucial truth. Your environment shapes your actions far more powerfully than your intentions ever could. Your surroundings silently guide your behavior through countless invisible nudges, creating either friction or flow for specific actions. This isn't a weakness of character. It's the fundamental nature of human behavior. Think of your environment as a river's course. Water doesn't decide where to flow through conscious choice. It follows the path of least resistance carved into the landscape. Similarly, your daily actions tend to flow along the channels created by your physical surroundings, regardless of your mental state or intentions. This insight transforms the challenge of behavior change. Instead of relying on fluctuating willpower or motivation, you can deliberately architect your environment to make desired behaviors the natural path of least resistance. This isn't about forcing change through brute force. It's about making productive actions easier than unproductive ones. Your brain constantly scans the environment for cues about what actions to take, often before conscious awareness kicks in. When your phone sits within arm's reach while working, it creates a perpetual pull on your attention. When healthy snacks require opening a container while junk food sits readily available, you've unconsciously stacked the odds against your nutrition goals. These aren't failures of discipline. They're predictable responses to environmental design. Behavioral science reveals how seemingly minor environmental factors create massive behavioral impacts across populations. Moving healthy food to eye level in cafeterias significantly increases healthy choices. Adding just 20 seconds of effort to access unhealthy snacks dramatically reduces consumption. Placing a water bottle on your desk each morning increases hydration more effectively than any amount of conscious intention. This points to a revolutionary approach. Instead of trying to overpower your environment through willpower, reshape it to naturally guide desired behaviors. This is behavior architecture. The deliberate design of your surroundings to make productive actions flow more easily than unproductive ones. The key lies in understanding friction, the effort required to perform any action. Every behavior has built-in friction, either supporting or hindering its execution. By strategically adding friction to unwanted behaviors while removing it from desired ones, you can dramatically shift behavioral patterns without requiring constant conscious effort. Want to read more? Place books in prominent locations while tucking away electronic devices. Hoping to exercise in the morning? Set out your workout clothes the night before, while making entertainment options less accessible. Trying to maintain a meditation practice. Create a dedicated space with everything needed, eliminating the friction of daily setup. Even when you can't completely control your environment, you can modify key elements to support desired behaviors. A simple visual trigger, strategic placement of tools, or minor adjustment to physical layout can significantly impact behavioral probability. The goal isn't to create perfect conditions. It's to thoughtfully adjust available friction to support rather than hinder your intentions. This approach transcends the limitations of motivation-dependent change. Rather than fighting against your natural behavioral tendencies, you're creating structures that work with them. It's like installing guardrails on a mountain road. You're not forcing the car to stay on track through constant steering, but making it easier to follow the intended path. Your environment will shape your behavior whether you design it intentionally or not. By understanding this principle, you can transform your surroundings from invisible saboteur to powerful ally in creating lasting change. Beyond environmental design lies an even more fundamental level of behavior change, one that operates at the level of identity itself. When you shift how you view yourself, new behaviors begin to flow naturally, transcending both willpower and environmental constraints. This transformation runs deeper than simple habit formation or external adjustments. You're no longer pushing against resistance or relying on carefully crafted surroundings. You're expressing who you truly are. The actions that once required conscious effort become natural expressions of your authentic self, as automatic as breathing. Chapter 8: The Identity Shift. The most profound difference in human behavior isn't between those who succeed and those who fail at difficult tasks. It's between those who must force themselves to act and those who simply express who they are. Consider two people performing identical physical actions. One struggles through a morning run, battling internal resistance every step, while another flows naturally into their morning miles, experiencing the same activity as a natural expression of their identity. The physical actions are identical, yet the psychological experience is worlds apart. This stark contrast reveals a fundamental truth about behavior change. The most reliable path to consistent action isn't through stronger willpower or better motivation. It's through identity transformation. When actions align with identity, resistance melts away. The internal battle between what you should do and what you want to do dissolves when those actions simply reflect who you are. Your self-concept functions as an internal guidance system, silently directing your behavior toward actions that feel congruent with your identity while creating resistance to those that don't. This explains why some people consistently perform difficult behaviors with apparent ease. They're not exercising superhuman willpower. They're expressing their identity. The power of identity-based behavior becomes clear when you examine how different people approach the same challenges. Someone who sees themselves as health-conscious doesn't need willpower to choose nutritious foods. They're simply acting in alignment with their self-image. Someone who identifies as disciplined doesn't need motivation to start difficult tasks. They're expressing a core aspect of who they are. This insight transforms our approach to change. Instead of focusing on what you should do, shift attention to who you're becoming. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you believe yourself to be. Each time you follow through on a commitment, you strengthen your identity as someone who keeps their word. Every time you start a difficult task without procrastinating, you reinforce your self-image as someone who takes decisive action. Your brain naturally seeks consistency between your actions and your self-image. By deliberately cultivating specific identities, you can harness this powerful psychological drive. Rather than fighting against your natural tendencies, you create a situation where taking desired actions feels like authentic self-expression. This identity-first approach explains why traditional behavior change strategies often fail. Relying on willpower or motivation while maintaining an inconsistent self-image creates constant internal conflict. It's like trying to force a compass to point in a direction opposite its natural alignment. It will always pull back toward its true north. The practical path to identity transformation begins with language. The phrases "I am" and "I do" carry far more psychological weight than "I should" or "I want to." When you say, "I am becoming someone who," you engage deeper levels of motivation than when you say, "I need to start." This isn't mere semantic wordplay. It's about aligning your self-concept with your desired behaviors. Evidence gathering accelerates identity formation. Your brain constantly looks for proof to support its beliefs about who you are. By deliberately collecting and reflecting on evidence of your emerging identity, you strengthen these new self-perceptions. Each small action that aligns with your desired identity becomes a building block of your new self-concept. While this transformation is powerful, it requires patience and strategic progression. You can't simply declare a new identity and expect immediate change. Instead, start with small actions that feel authentic to your emerging identity. As evidence accumulates and your self-concept shifts, increasingly challenging behaviors begin to feel natural rather than forced. This approach transcends the limitations of both willpower and environmental design because it works with your brain's fundamental drive for consistency. When actions flow from identity, they bypass the need for constant conscious effort or external reinforcement. The resistance you feel toward certain behaviors isn't a character flaw. It's valuable feedback about misalignment between your actions and identity. By focusing on identity cultivation rather than behavior forcing, you create lasting change that feels like authentic self-expression rather than constant self-coercion. This inner friction serves as a compass, pointing toward areas where your self-image hasn't yet expanded to encompass new possibilities. When you attempt to force behaviors that conflict with your current identity, you're essentially fighting against your brain's fundamental drive for internal consistency. But by gradually evolving your self-concept first, those same behaviors begin to feel natural and aligned with who you are. The path to transformation lies not in overriding your resistance, but in understanding its message and using it as a guide for authentic growth. Chapter 9. The Commitment Device. You've likely noticed a peculiar pattern in your productivity. Tasks that drift endlessly when working alone suddenly become manageable, even urgent, when others are involved. That presentation you've been putting off for weeks gets completed the night before your team needs it. The website updates you've delayed for months happen immediately when a client asks for them. The workout you've been meaning to do materializes instantly when a training partner is waiting. This striking contrast reveals a fundamental truth about human behavior. External consequences often succeed precisely where willpower fails. Your brain's motivation centers respond more reliably to immediate, concrete consequences than to abstract future benefits. This isn't a character flaw, it's the predictable operation of neural circuitry designed for immediate survival rather than long-term planning. What makes this insight particularly valuable is that you can deliberately harness this tendency through strategic pre-commitment, creating consequences that your brain can't ignore. Instead of relying on fluctuating motivation or willpower, you can establish external structures that ensure follow-through regardless of how you feel in the moment. Think of pre-commitment as future self-protection. When you're clear-headed and motivated, you can make decisions that protect your important goals from the inevitable moments when your motivation wavers. This isn't about restricting your freedom. It's about ensuring your actions align with your deeper values, rather than momentary impulses. Your present self often underestimates how differently your future self will think and feel. In the evening, you confidently commit to waking up early to work out. But when morning arrives, your brain generates compelling reasons to stay in bed. Pre-commitment mechanisms bridge this gap between your aspirational and present self. Behavioral economics research consistently shows that voluntary constraints paradoxically increase freedom by ensuring follow-through on important goals. When students voluntarily restrict their social media access during study hours, their academic performance improves significantly. When people allow automatic transfers to savings accounts, their financial security increases dramatically. The key insight is that these constraints aren't imposed. They're chosen specifically to protect what matters most. The most effective pre-commitment strategies create immediate, unavoidable consequences for procrastination. Social accountability leverages your brain's powerful desire to maintain commitments to others. Financial stakes engage loss aversion, your brain's tendency to work harder to avoid losses than to achieve equivalent gains. Strategic choice elimination removes decision points where motivation typically falters. You might resist creating consequences for yourself, viewing it as unnecessary or even punitive. But this resistance often comes from the same part of your brain that resists the important work itself. Remember, consequences aren't punishment. They're protection for your most meaningful goals. When designing commitment devices, calibrate them precisely to your personal resistance patterns. If social pressure motivates you strongly, build in regular check-ins with an accountability partner. If financial stakes get you moving, put money on the line through commitment contracts. If decision fatigue derails you, eliminate choices about when and where you'll work. The key is creating consequences that are meaningful enough to override momentary discomfort, but not so severe that you avoid engaging with them entirely. Start small, with stakes that feel challenging but manageable, and adjust based on your response. Successful pre-commitment also requires closing potential loopholes your future self might exploit. Make consequences immediate and automatic rather than requiring your future self to enforce them. Use third-party platforms or accountability partners who won't accept the creative excuses your brain will inevitably generate. The power of pre-commitment lies in its ability to bypass the need for constant motivation or willpower. Instead of fighting against your brain's natural tendencies, you're creating external structures that work with them. This approach acknowledges that consistency comes not from being perpetually disciplined, but from strategically limiting your options when motivation inevitably wavers. Your brain's response to consequences isn't a weakness to overcome. It's a powerful mechanism you can intentionally engage for positive change. By creating structures that ensure follow-through regardless of emotional state, you transform the experience of difficult tasks from a daily willpower battle into a natural response to established consequences. Strategic reward integration presents another powerful tool for engaging your brain's motivation centers, creating consistent action through positive reinforcement rather than consequences alone. By thoughtfully linking rewards to specific actions, you tap into your brain's natural drive toward pleasure and satisfaction. This isn't about bribing yourself with treats. It's about engineering an environment where productive behaviors become intrinsically rewarding. The key lies in selecting rewards that genuinely resonate while maintaining a clear connection between action and outcome, allowing your brain to forge lasting positive associations that pull you forward naturally. Chapter 10. The Reward Revolution. You constantly face an internal battle between what you logically know you should do and what your emotional brain finds immediately rewarding. This isn't a character flaw or lack of discipline. It's the natural operation of neural circuitry evolved for immediate survival rather than long-term achievement. Understanding this fundamental mismatch between your conscious intentions and your brain's reward systems reveals an opportunity for strategic self-manipulation that can transform how you approach difficult tasks. Your brain operates on a simple principle. It seeks to repeat actions that release dopamine and avoid those that don't. This creates an inherent bias toward immediate pleasure over delayed gratification, regardless of your conscious priorities. What makes this insight powerful is that you can deliberately engineer your environment and habits to align your brain's reward mechanisms with your long-term goals. The traditional approach of trying to override your brain's reward preferences through sheer willpower consistently fails because it works against your neural architecture rather than with it. Instead, you can create artificial reward bridges that connect immediate action with your brain's pleasure centers, even when the natural rewards are delayed. Consider how slot machines keep people engaged through variable reinforcement. The unpredictable timing of rewards creates more powerful motivation than consistent rewards. This same principle can be ethically applied to productive behaviors. By introducing elements of variability and immediate positive feedback into otherwise challenging tasks, you transform the experience from one your brain wants to avoid into one it seeks to repeat. Through reward layering, you can stack multiple sources of immediate satisfaction onto activities that typically offer only delayed benefits. This isn't about bribing yourself. It's about working with your brain's actual operational patterns rather than fighting against them. The key is creating genuine positive associations that your emotional brain can recognize and respond to, rather than relying on logical arguments that fail to engage your motivation centers. Your brain's reward systems respond more powerfully to progress you can see and measure. By making advancement visible and creating multiple markers of achievement along the way, you transform abstract long-term goals into a series of immediate rewards that directly engage your dopamine systems. This explains why fitness trackers and productivity apps can significantly impact behavior. They make progress tangible and immediately rewarding. The most effective reward integration strategies work by bundling naturally enjoyable activities with challenging ones. This creates positive associations that gradually transform how your brain perceives previously difficult tasks. Over time, the artificial rewards can be slowly reduced as the activities themselves become intrinsically rewarding through repeated positive association. Variable reward schedules prove particularly powerful because they maintain higher levels of dopamine activity than fixed schedules. By introducing elements of unpredictability into your reward system, you create stronger motivation than offering yourself the same reward every time. This explains why social media platforms are so engaging. The variable nature of responses creates a powerful dopamine loop that keeps users returning. Progress tracking systems serve a dual purpose. They make advancement visible while simultaneously activating reward centers through the satisfaction of recording achievement. This explains why crossing items off a to-do list feels disproportionately satisfying. It provides immediate positive feedback for completion, regardless of the task's actual importance. When implementing reward integration strategies, your brain may initially resist artificial motivation systems, arguing that you should be able to do important things without external rewards. This resistance stems from a misunderstanding of how motivation actually works. Your brain's reward systems aren't optional features you can override through logic. They're fundamental mechanisms that influence every decision you make. The goal isn't to permanently maintain artificial reward systems, but to use them strategically while building positive associations that gradually transform how your brain responds to previously challenging tasks. Through deliberate reward integration, you can create sustainable motivation patterns that work with your neural architecture rather than against it. As you consistently pair actions with rewards, your brain begins to associate the tasks themselves with positive emotions, making them inherently more appealing. This natural rewiring process mirrors how you've already learned to enjoy activities that were once challenging or unpleasant, from acquiring new skills to developing specific tastes. Your brain's remarkable plasticity means that with patience and consistent reinforcement, even the most daunting tasks can become neutral or even appealing, eliminating the need for external motivation systems altogether. Chapter 11. The Friction Principle. Your actions consistently flow along the path of least resistance, like water moving downhill. This isn't a weakness. It's a fundamental principle of human behavior that explains why your best intentions often crumble in the face of convenience. Understanding this tendency reveals a powerful opportunity for behavior change that doesn't depend on constant willpower or motivation. The path of least resistance shapes your choices far more powerfully than conscious intention. When healthy snacks are hidden in the back of the refrigerator, while processed foods sit at eye level, your behavior naturally flows toward what's immediately accessible. When your phone is within arm's reach while you work, your attention naturally drifts toward its frictionless distractions. Your brain automatically calculates effort costs for every possible action, steering you toward choices that require the least energy expenditure. This calculation happens below conscious awareness, which is why you often find yourself making convenient but regrettable choices despite your best intentions. The key insight is that this tendency can be redirected rather than overcome through force. Behavioral economics research consistently demonstrates that even minimal increases in friction dramatically alter behavior patterns. When cafeterias place healthier options at eye level and less healthy choices below, fruit and vegetable consumption increases significantly without any changes to menu items or prices. When websites add just one extra click to access distracting content, engagement drops substantially. Instead of fighting against your natural inclination toward ease, you can strategically manipulate friction to make desired behaviors the path of least resistance. This approach works with your brain's tendency to minimize effort rather than requiring constant conscious override of this protective mechanism. Choice architecture, the deliberate design of decision environments, determines behavior more reliably than willpower. By creating strategic friction for undesired behaviors while removing friction for desired ones, you ensure your automatic choices align with your conscious intentions. The practical implementation focuses on three key areas. choice simplification, decision elimination, and strategic inconvenience. Choice simplification reduces the cognitive load of positive decisions by limiting options and making the best choice obvious. Decision elimination creates automatic defaults that support your goals, removing the need for active choice in crucial moments. Strategic inconvenience places small but effective barriers before unwanted behaviors, redirecting your natural tendency toward ease. Most people significantly underestimate how sensitive their behavior is to small differences in convenience. Adding just 20 seconds of friction to an unwanted behavior can reduce its frequency dramatically. Similarly, removing even minor obstacles from desired behaviors can increase their likelihood substantially. The goal isn't to make good choices that require zero effort. That's often impossible. Instead, you're aiming to ensure that positive choices require less effort than negative ones. This subtle re-engineering of your choice environment creates sustainable behavior change without depleting limited willpower resources. Your physical and digital environments can be deliberately designed to guide you toward productive choices without requiring conscious deliberation each time. The key is identifying where current friction patterns oppose your goals and systematically reversing them to support desired behaviors. When you understand that convenience shapes choices more powerfully than conviction, you stop relying on motivation and start creating environments that naturally guide you toward positive actions. This shift from forcing behavior through willpower to designing surroundings that support your goals transforms the experience of behavior change from constant struggle to natural flow. Energy management fundamentally shapes your capacity for consistent action in ways that transcend traditional time management approaches. While schedules and to-do lists help organize your tasks, they can't address the deeper reality that your ability to take meaningful action fluctuates throughout each day. Your energy, physical, mental, and emotional, operates like a precious currency that determines not just what you can do, but how effectively and sustainably you can do it. No amount of careful planning can compensate for depleted energy reserves or overcome the natural rhythms that govern your peak performance windows. Chapter 12: The Energy Equation. You have the time. The calendar shows a clear 3-hour block. Your to-do list is prioritized. All notifications are silenced. Yet you sit there staring at your important work, feeling mentally exhausted before you've even begun. This isn't a time management problem, it's an energy crisis. The fundamental flaw in most productivity systems is their singular focus on time allocation. They treat every hour as equal, ignoring the reality that your capacity for focused work dramatically varies throughout the day. Time is meaningless without the mental, emotional, and physical energy to use it effectively. Your brain consumes more energy than any other organ, using up to 20% of your body's resources, while representing only 2% of your body weight. This biological reality means cognitive effort is inherently draining. When you force yourself to perform demanding tasks during natural energy valleys, you're fighting against your brain's fundamental operating principles. Think of your cognitive resources like a battery that charges and depletes in predictable patterns. Just as a phone performs differently at 100% versus 20% battery life, your capacity for different types of work varies significantly based on your current energy levels. The key isn't finding more time. It's matching specific activities to your natural energy rhythms. Your mental energy naturally oscillates through distinct cycles throughout the day. These cycles create windows where certain types of work feel almost effortless, while the same tasks feel impossibly difficult at other times. This isn't a character flaw or lack of discipline, it's your brain's natural rhythm. Different tasks require distinctly different types of mental energy. Strategic planning, creative work, and detailed analysis each draw upon separate cognitive resources. When you treat all tasks as interchangeable units of time, you ignore these crucial distinctions, making work unnecessarily difficult. Modern workplaces often operate on the industrial assumption that productivity should remain constant throughout the day. This ignores fundamental biology and sets up an impossible standard that leads to chronic stress and diminished performance. Working with your energy rhythms isn't lazy, it's strategically efficient. The solution begins with energy tracking, observing and documenting your natural patterns of peak performance and inevitable valleys. When do you naturally feel most alert? When does creative work flow easily? When do detail-oriented tasks feel most manageable? These patterns reveal your optimal windows for different types of work. Once you understand your energy patterns, categorize your tasks based on their cognitive demands. High-energy tasks requiring deep focus or creative insight should be scheduled during your peak periods. Administrative work, routine tasks, and activities requiring less cognitive horsepower can fill the valleys. Strategic renewal practices become essential tools for maintaining productive energy. Brief periods of genuine rest, whether through movement, meditation, or complete disconnection, aren't indulgences, but vital investments in your cognitive resources. These recovery periods allow you to maintain higher average energy rather than swinging between extremes. The most successful people don't have more willpower or discipline. They're simply more strategic about matching their most important work to their periods of peak energy. They understand that trying to force deep work during natural energy valleys is both inefficient and unsustainable. Your energy patterns may not perfectly align with conventional work schedules. That's normal. The goal isn't to conform to an ideal schedule, but to identify and leverage your personal rhythms. Even within external constraints, small adjustments in task timing can significantly impact your effectiveness. Energy management doesn't mean working less. It means working smarter by aligning tasks with your natural capacity. This approach often enables more total productivity while reducing the subjective experience of effort. You're not doing less. You're doing things at the right time. The path forward isn't about finding more hours in the day or forcing yourself to maintain constant output. It's about understanding and strategically leveraging your natural energy patterns to make important work feel easier and more sustainable. Time management without energy management is like having a full tank of gas in a car with a dead battery. The potential is there, but you lack the power to use it effectively. Your productivity isn't a linear equation of time invested, but rather a dynamic interplay between your capacity and your tasks. When you align your most demanding work with your peak energy periods, you unlock a level of effectiveness that no amount of pushing through fatigue can match. This isn't about working harder or longer. It's about working in harmony with your body's natural rhythms, transforming resistance into flow. The most successful people aren't necessarily those who work the most hours, but those who master the art of matching their energy to their objectives. Chapter 13. The Perspective Pivot. The same task sits before two different people. One experiences it as an oppressive burden, their chest tightening with dread as they contemplate the work ahead. The other approaches it with genuine curiosity and engagement, seeing an opportunity for growth and mastery. The circumstances are identical, but their experiences exist in completely different emotional universes. This stark contrast illuminates a fundamental truth about human experience. Your perception shapes reality more powerfully than objective conditions. When you view difficult work as punishment, your brain activates stress responses that make everything feel harder. When you see the same work as growth, your neural pathways align to support engagement and learning. Your mind isn't simply recording reality, it's creating your experience of it through the stories and meanings you attach to each moment. These interpretations determine whether you meet challenges with resistance or resourcefulness, whether you feel trapped by obligations or engaged in meaningful pursuit. The transformative power of perception operates through your brain's meaning-making mechanisms. When you interpret a task as threatening, your amygdala triggers protective responses that make focus and engagement nearly impossible. When you view the same task as an opportunity, your prefrontal cortex activates reward circuits that enhance motivation and capability. Think of your perceptual frameworks as mental lenses through which you view every experience. Just as camera filters dramatically alter how a scene appears without changing its physical reality, your interpretive lenses transform how you experience challenges without requiring external changes. The task remains identical, but your relationship with it shifts completely. Most people assume their interpretations of difficulty reflect objective reality rather than chosen perspectives. When work feels oppressive, it seems self-evident that it is oppressive. When challenges feel threatening, their threatening nature appears undeniable. Yet research consistently demonstrates that subtle shifts in mental framing powerfully alter both emotional experience and actual performance. Studies in cognitive psychology reveal how framing effects influence everything from pain tolerance to athletic performance. When subjects reframe physical strain as evidence of getting stronger rather than breaking down, their endurance dramatically increases. When students view tests as opportunities to learn rather than judgments of worth, both their experience and scores improve. Your brain automatically generates interpretations of every situation you encounter. But these interpretations are choices you can influence rather than fixed realities you must accept. Through deliberate cognitive reframing, you can transform how you experience necessary difficulties without denying their challenging nature. The process begins with recognizing genuine benefits within necessary challenges, not as fake positivity, but as an exploration of legitimate advantages you might be overlooking. Every difficulty contains potential for growth, skill development, or meaningful achievement when viewed through the right lens. This shift requires engaging your natural curiosity about how different perspectives might transform your experience. Rather than forcing yourself to think positive, you're investigating how various interpretive frames affect your relationship with challenges. By connecting immediate struggles to deeper values and long-term aspirations, you infuse difficult moments with personal meaning. The same actions take on new significance when viewed as steps toward meaningful growth rather than arbitrary obligations. This reframing isn't about denying reality or suppressing genuine emotions. It's about expanding your perceptual range to include interpretations that serve you better while remaining grounded in truth. You're not pretending challenges don't exist. You're transforming your relationship with them. The power of perception extends far beyond temporary mood enhancement. When you systematically shift how you interpret challenges, you literally rewire your brain's response patterns. What once triggered threat responses begins activating reward circuits instead. Changing your relationship with challenges often proves more effective than trying to eliminate them entirely. Rather than waging a constant battle against difficulty, you can transform how you experience necessary struggles, reducing resistance without requiring endless willpower. Through deliberate cognitive reframing, what you once experienced as pure burden can become genuine opportunity. not through denial or forced positivity, but through an expanded understanding of how perception shapes reality. The circumstances remain unchanged, but your experience transforms completely. The key isn't to ignore challenges or pretend they don't exist. It's to recognize that your interpretations dramatically influence your experience, and that these interpretations are more flexible than they appear. By consciously choosing more empowering perspectives, you can transform your relationship with difficulty itself. Chapter 14. The Curiosity Cure. You sit before a challenging task, feeling the familiar weight of expectation and judgment pressing down. The mere thought of potential failure triggers an instinctive resistance, making even the first step feel impossibly daunting. Yet this same task, approached with genuine curiosity rather than pressure to perform, transforms into something entirely different. When you shift from "I must succeed" to "I wonder what will happen," the psychological landscape changes dramatically. Consider how children naturally approach new challenges. They don't worry about doing things perfectly. They experiment, explore, and treat each outcome as fascinating information rather than personal judgment. This natural experimental mindset which you once possessed remains accessible when you consciously shift your approach from performance to exploration. Your brain responds differently to curiosity than to pressure. When you approach a task with genuine interest in what might happen rather than anxiety about what could go wrong, you activate reward circuits rather than threat responses. This neurological shift creates an optimal state for both learning and performance, bypassing the very resistance that typically derails your efforts. The key lies in becoming a scientist of your own experience. Just as researchers view unexpected results as valuable data rather than failures, you can approach your challenges with an experimental mindset that transforms setbacks from discouraging failures into interesting information. This isn't about lowering standards. It's about creating psychological safety that allows you to engage fully with the task at hand. When you frame a challenging project as an experiment rather than a test of your worth, you create space for genuine engagement. Instead of asking, "Will I succeed or fail?" you begin asking, "What will I discover?" This subtle shift in framing dissolves the paralysis of perfectionism and creates natural momentum where force once failed. Your resistance to difficult tasks often stems from the pressure of binary thinking: success or failure, good or bad, right or wrong. But when you adopt an experimental mindset, you expand beyond these limiting categories into a realm of endless discovery. Each attempt becomes data, each setback offers insights, and the entire process transforms from a judgment of your worth into an exploration of possibilities. This shift to curiosity isn't about avoiding responsibility or commitment. Rather, it's about creating conditions that allow you to bring your full capabilities to the task at hand. When you're not defending against potential failure, you can engage more deeply with the work itself. The irony is that by caring less about the outcome, you often perform better. Consider how differently you approach activities when genuinely curious versus when feeling pressured to perform. Curiosity creates a state of natural engagement that no amount of forced focus can match. It bypasses the mental resistance that typically requires willpower to overcome, making difficult tasks not necessarily easier, but fundamentally more engaging. The experimental mindset also provides natural resilience in the face of setbacks. When unexpected outcomes are viewed as interesting data rather than personal failures, you maintain the emotional equilibrium necessary for sustained effort. This doesn't mean you don't care about results. Rather, you create a psychological container that allows you to work effectively toward those results without being paralyzed by their importance. To transform pressure into exploration, begin forming hypotheses rather than expectations. Instead of approaching a task with rigid requirements for success, create questions you'd like to answer through the process. This subtle shift maintains high standards while removing the psychological weight that creates resistance. Practice outcome detachment by focusing on what you can discover rather than what you must achieve. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent to results, but rather creating enough psychological space to engage fully with the process itself. When you're not constantly defending against potential failure, you can bring your full capabilities to the task at hand. The most powerful aspect of curiosity-based engagement is its sustainability. Unlike forcing yourself through resistance, which depletes limited willpower resources, genuine curiosity creates natural momentum that can sustain long-term effort. You move from pushing yourself to being pulled forward by your own interest and discovery. Chapter 15: The Psychological Distance. When it comes to making wise decisions and taking effective action, proximity is often your greatest enemy. You've likely experienced the striking contrast between the clarity you possess when advising friends versus the confusion that clouds your judgment when facing similar situations yourself. This phenomenon isn't coincidental. It's a fundamental aspect of human psychology that creates a predictable blind spot in your decision-making. Your brain processes psychologically distant situations differently than immediate ones. When helping others, you naturally access a more objective, strategic perspective because you're not entangled in the emotional web that accompanies personal challenges. This emotional distance activates different neural networks, engaging the prefrontal cortex, your brain's center for rational analysis, rather than the limbic system's emotional responses. This explains why you can readily see solutions for others that remain hidden when considering your own challenges. The psychological proximity of personal situations triggers threat responses that override your natural wisdom. Your brain, designed primarily for survival, responds to immediate personal challenges by narrowing focus and amplifying emotional signals, a response that served our ancestors well when facing physical threats, but often impairs modern decision-making. Consider how elevation changes perspective. From ground level, you're immersed in immediate details and obstacles. But as you gain altitude, patterns emerge, and pathways become visible that are impossible to discern from below. This same principle applies to psychological elevation. Creating mental distance from your challenges allows you to access broader perspective and deeper wisdom. Research in construal-level theory demonstrates how psychological distance systematically changes information processing. When events are perceived as distant, whether temporally, spatially, or socially, your mind naturally focuses on essential elements, rather than incidental details. This higher-level construct leads to better decision-making and reduced emotional reactivity. This understanding reveals why traditional advice to think objectively often fails. You can't simply command yourself to be objective any more than you can order yourself to feel motivated. Instead, you must create conditions that naturally enable clearer thinking through strategic self-distancing. The most powerful distance-creating technique involves linguistic shifts in self-talk. When you refer to yourself by name rather than using I, you automatically activate the same neural networks engaged when thinking about others. This simple shift creates sufficient psychological space to access your natural wisdom while maintaining emotional engagement. Temporal distancing offers another powerful perspective shift. By mentally projecting yourself into the future and looking back on current challenges, you engage different cognitive processes that naturally reduce present emotional intensity. This isn't about imagining an idealized future, but about accessing the wisdom that time naturally provides. These distancing techniques work because they align with your brain's natural functioning rather than fighting against it. They don't require suppressing emotions or forcing objectivity. Instead, they create conditions where clarity naturally emerges. When implementing psychological distancing, precision matters. The goal isn't emotional detachment, but rather creating just enough space to see more clearly while maintaining meaningful engagement. Too little distance keeps you trapped in emotional reactivity, while too much distance risks disconnection from important emotional signals. The key lies in viewing psychological distance as a tool for accessing wisdom rather than escaping difficulty. By temporarily stepping back, you create space for your natural intelligence to emerge, the same intelligence you easily access when helping others. This understanding transforms how you approach challenging decisions and persistent obstacles. Instead of trying to force clarity through sheer willpower, you can strategically create psychological space that allows wisdom to naturally arise. The power of psychological distancing extends beyond decision-making into areas of creativity, emotional regulation, and behavioral change. When you're too close to a situation, possibilities contract and resistance intensifies. But with appropriate distance, new pathways become visible and emotional barriers naturally dissolve. Your mind opens to innovative solutions that were there all along, hidden behind the fog of immediate reactivity. This subtle shift in perspective acts like a master key, unlocking doors not just to better choices, but to entirely new ways of responding to old challenges. The same situation that once felt hopelessly stuck transforms into a landscape of possibilities, each one inviting exploration and growth. Chapter 16: The Tiny Action. Your ambition might be your greatest obstacle to progress. When facing important goals, you naturally set substantial commitments that feel proportionate to your aspirations. This instinct seems logical. Meaningful achievements require meaningful action. Yet this approach often triggers the very resistance that prevents progress, creating a paradoxical situation where bigger intentions lead to smaller results. Your brain's threat detection system activates in proportion to perceived task difficulty. The more significant an action appears, the more likely it is to trigger protection mechanisms designed to keep you safe from potential failure, judgment, or discomfort. This creates an inverse relationship between perceived action size and likelihood of initiation. The larger the commitment, the stronger the resistance. However, this same mechanism reveals a powerful opportunity for strategic self-manipulation. Just as your brain automatically raises defenses against perceived threats, it also allows actions below a certain threshold to pass unnoticed. By deliberately designing commitments small enough to bypass your protective mechanisms, you can create momentum precisely when motivation is lowest. Think of your resistance as operating like a security system with specific sensitivity settings. Actions above a certain size trigger alarms, while those below this threshold pass through undetected. This resistance threshold varies between individuals and situations, but everyone has a level where actions become small enough to fly under their psychological radar. Research in behavior change consistently demonstrates that minimum viable actions, steps so small they seem almost insignificant, often create more sustainable progress than ambitious transformations. This isn't because small steps are inherently superior, but because they're more likely to be taken consistently. The most powerful action is the one you actually perform, regardless of its size. Consider how your brain assesses potential actions. When you contemplate writing a book, your mind immediately grapples with the enormity of the project, triggering protection mechanisms that generate procrastination. But when you commit to writing for just 1 minute, these same mechanisms remain dormant. The action is too small to register as a threat. This insight transforms how you approach challenging goals. Instead of fighting against your brain's protective responses with willpower or motivation, you can simply make your actions small enough to avoid triggering them in the first place. This isn't about lowering standards or abandoning ambition. It's about creating consistent progress through strategic action sizing. The key lies in identifying your personal resistance threshold and deliberately designing commitments that fall below it. This might mean reducing your workout commitment from 30 minutes to 1 minute, your writing goal from 1 page to 1 sentence, or your cleaning objective from an entire room to a single surface. While these commitments might seem inadequately small, they serve as entrance ramps to larger action by establishing momentum without triggering resistance. The 1 minute rule provides a concrete example of this principle in action. By committing to just 60 seconds of a challenging task, you create an action so small that your brain's protective mechanisms don't activate. Once engaged, you often continue naturally beyond the initial commitment, not because you're forcing yourself, but because starting was the only real obstacle. Minimum viable actions work similarly by identifying the smallest possible step that still moves you forward. Instead of committing to a complete workout routine, you might simply put on your exercise clothes. Rather than tackling an entire project, you could open the relevant document and review the first paragraph. These seemingly insignificant actions create progress by establishing engagement without triggering resistance. What makes this approach particularly powerful is its reliability during low motivation periods. When you're feeling energized and motivated, action size matters less because your heightened state naturally overcomes resistance. But during the inevitable periods of low motivation, having actions small enough to execute regardless of emotional state becomes crucial for maintaining momentum. This approach often triggers skepticism. Surely such small actions can't lead to meaningful achievement. Yet this perspective misses the profound difference between what gets you started and what keeps you going. The size of your initial action matters far less than its ability to create engagement. Once begun, you can naturally expand your effort based on available energy and motivation rather than forcing yourself through resistance. Your brain's threat detection system doesn't distinguish between real and imagined dangers. It responds to perceived size and difficulty. By understanding and working with this mechanism rather than fighting against it, you can create consistent progress through actions so small they bypass resistance entirely. This isn't about thinking small, it's about starting small to enable thinking big. Chapter 17. The Choice Illusion. Every time you face a choice point, you create an opportunity for abandonment. This fundamental truth explains why even your strongest commitments often dissolve in the moment of decision. You've experienced this countless times. The firm resolution to exercise that evaporates when choosing between morning or evening workouts. The commitment to focused work that unravels when deciding which task deserves priority. The intention to eat healthily that crumbles when confronting multiple menu options. These decision points aren't just opportunities for procrastination. They actively deplete the mental resources you need for follow-through. Your brain processes each choice as a meaningful expenditure of energy, drawing from the same limited pool of resources required for self-regulation and willpower. This creates a cruel irony. The more decisions you face about taking positive action, the less mental energy you have available to actually execute that action. Understanding this mechanism reveals why traditional approaches to consistency often fail. When you rely on making the right choice at each decision point, you're essentially gambling your success on having sufficient mental resources at exactly the moments when those resources are being depleted. It's like trying to drive across the country while stopping every mile to decide whether to continue. Each pause creates unnecessary friction and increases the likelihood of turning back. The solution lies not in strengthening your decision-making ability, but in eliminating decision points entirely. Through pre-commitment and systematic decision elimination, you can create unbroken pathways to action that bypass the mental negotiation that typically precedes important tasks. Consider how you navigate your morning hygiene routine. You don't wake up each day and deliberate whether to brush your teeth, which toothbrush to use, or how long to brush. These decisions were eliminated long ago through habit formation and environmental design. The result is consistent action without mental friction, precisely the state you want to create for other important behaviors. This same principle can be applied to any area where you seek consistent action. By identifying and eliminating decision bottlenecks, those points where choice creates unnecessary friction, you can establish automatic response patterns that ensure follow-through without requiring repeated acts of willpower. The key lies in transforming multiple decision points into single pre-decisions that commit you to specific actions in advance. Rather than deciding each day whether, when, and how to exercise, you make one comprehensive decision that establishes exactly what you'll do when specific triggers occur. This transforms daily choices into simple if-then responses. If it's 6 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday, then I go to the gym and complete my pre-planned workout. This approach isn't about eliminating free will. It's about strategically limiting certain choices to expand your ability to achieve what truly matters. By removing the mental burden of repeated decision-making, you free up cognitive resources for actual execution while simultaneously eliminating opportunities for resistance to derail your intentions. Research in psychological science consistently demonstrates how decision fatigue impairs self-regulation. Each choice you make depletes mental resources, regardless of the choice's importance. By the time you face crucial decisions about taking positive action, you may have already exhausted your decision-making capacity on trivial matters. This explains why even strong morning commitments often falter by evening. You've depleted your decision-making resources throughout the day. The solution is to establish decision-free systems that create automatic pathways to action. This involves identifying your key decision bottlenecks, those moments where choice typically leads to abandonment, and systematically eliminating them through pre-commitment and environmental design. The goal is to reduce the gap between intention and action by removing the mental negotiation that typically fills that space. You can apply this principle through implementation intentions, precise plans that specify exactly when, where, and how you'll take action. Instead of the vague intention to exercise more, you establish that when my 6 a.m. alarm sounds, I will put on my pre-laid workout clothes and complete my pre-planned routine. This eliminates the daily deliberation that often prevents action. Similarly, routine bundling creates automatic triggers for new behaviors by linking them to existing habits. Rather than deciding each day whether and when to meditate, you might attach this practice to your morning coffee routine. After I press start on the coffee maker, I sit in my designated meditation spot until the coffee is ready. This eliminates the decision point by creating an automatic cue for action. The resistance you might feel toward this approach, the sense that you're limiting your freedom or spontaneity, actually reveals its power. This discomfort stems from surrendering the illusion of daily choice in favor of pre-commitment to what truly matters. It's a trade-off between maintaining the fantasy of unlimited daily options and actually achieving your most important goals. The most successful individuals often maintain remarkably consistent routines, not because they possess superior discipline, but because they've eliminated the decision points where discipline typically fails. They understand that freedom comes not from maintaining endless daily choices, but from ensuring consistent action toward what matters most. Your path to sustainable action lies not in strengthening willpower, but in strategically eliminating the decision points where willpower typically fails. By creating systems that transform daily choices into automatic responses, you ensure follow-through regardless of momentary motivation or mental state. Chapter 18: The Progress Principle. You know the profound difference between working tirelessly without apparent results versus witnessing clear evidence of your progress. When advancement remains invisible, even modest efforts can feel draining and pointless. Yet those same actions become energizing and almost effortless when you can see your progress taking shape. This isn't just a matter of preference or personality. It's hardwired into your brain's motivation systems. Your brain is constantly evaluating whether your efforts are producing meaningful results. When progress remains invisible, your protective mechanisms begin questioning whether continued effort is worthwhile. But when advancement becomes tangible, your brain's reward circuits activate automatically, creating intrinsic motivation that bypasses typical resistance patterns. This explains why some people maintain incredible persistence toward certain goals, while struggling to sustain even basic efforts toward others. The difference often isn't in the importance of the goals, or even in the difficulty of the actions. It's in the visibility of progress. A writer working on a manuscript sees their word count growing daily. An athlete watches their performance metrics improve steadily. A gardener witnesses their plants flourishing visibly. In each case, clear evidence of advancement creates a self-reinforcing cycle of motivation and action. The satisfaction of visible progress activates reward circuits in ways that discipline and willpower never can. When you can see yourself moving forward, motivation becomes less about forcing yourself to act and more about responding to the natural pull of progress. This explains why progress bars are so effective at maintaining engagement, why fitness trackers can dramatically increase exercise consistency, and why video games can sustain attention for hours through carefully designed advancement systems. Through the metaphor of progress breadcrumbs, you can understand how strategic tracking creates a trail of evidence that pulls you forward naturally. Just as a hiker feels encouraged by marking their advancement along a trail, your brain responds powerfully to clear signs of progress toward your goals. These breadcrumbs serve multiple purposes. They provide concrete evidence of movement, create natural pause points for celebration and reflection, and offer clear reference points when motivation wavers. This insight is particularly crucial during extended projects where natural feedback is limited or delayed. Your brain's motivation systems evolved for immediate cause and effect relationships. Hunt successfully, eat immediately. But many modern pursuits require sustained effort before results become apparent. By deliberately creating evidence of progress along the way, you bridge this gap between effort and outcome. Research consistently demonstrates how progress visibility influences persistence, engagement, and satisfaction. Studies across diverse domains, from education to creative work, show that people who can track their advancement maintain motivation longer, report greater satisfaction, and ultimately achieve better outcomes than those working without clear progress markers. The key lies in understanding that progress perception isn't just about measuring advancement. It's about creating psychological evidence that your efforts are meaningful and effective. This explains why the same amount of objective progress can feel radically different depending on how it's framed and tracked. Your brain's need for evidence of progress isn't a weakness to overcome. It's a powerful system to leverage. By understanding this fundamental aspect of your psychology, you can design progress tracking systems that work with your brain's natural tendencies rather than against them. This creates sustainable momentum without requiring constant discipline or external motivation. Progress visibility is particularly powerful because it creates a positive feedback loop. When you can see your advancement, you feel more motivated to continue. This increased motivation leads to more action, which creates more visible progress, further strengthening your motivation. This self-reinforcing cycle can maintain momentum even through difficult phases of long-term pursuits. This understanding transforms how you approach goal pursuit. Rather than relying on discipline or willpower, you can focus on creating systems that make progress visible and meaningful. This might mean breaking larger goals into recognizable sub-goals, creating visual representations of advancement, or establishing metrics that highlight improvement from your starting point, rather than distance from your end goal. Conclusion: progress visibility transforms into what psychologists call progress loops, where seeing advancement creates satisfaction, which generates motivation, which drives further action, creating more visible progress. This self-reinforcing cycle explains why some of the most challenging pursuits become almost addictively engaging once you can track your improvement. Yet many important goals lack natural feedback mechanisms. Career advancement, relationship growth, personal development. These vital areas often progress in subtle ways that escape daily notice. This is where strategic progress tracking becomes essential. By deliberately creating evidence of advancement, you transform abstract pursuits into tangible journeys, where each step forward becomes both visible and motivating. The key lies in identifying the appropriate metrics for your specific goals. Financial goals naturally translate into numbers. But what about improving communication skills or becoming more patient? The solution is creating proxy measurements, indirect indicators that reflect meaningful progress. A communicator might track conversations initiated, conflicts navigated successfully, or moments of active listening practiced. Someone developing patience could note instances of pausing before responding, or times they chose perspective-taking over immediate reaction. These metrics serve as progress breadcrumbs, small but clear markers that reveal your path forward while simultaneously reinforcing your capacity for continued advancement. They transform the abstract into the concrete, the invisible into the visible, creating natural motivation through evidence of effective action. Progress tracking becomes particularly crucial during the middle phase of any significant undertaking, what psychology researchers call the messy middle, where initial enthusiasm has faded but the finish line remains distant. This is where visible progress serves as an emotional bridge, connecting present effort to future outcomes through tangible evidence of advancement. The brain's reward systems respond most powerfully to progress that feels both meaningful and achievable. Breaking larger goals into sub-goals creates multiple opportunities for this satisfaction response, but these milestones must be thoughtfully calibrated. Too distant, and they fail to generate current motivation. Too frequent, and they lose their emotional impact. The sweet spot lies in creating progress markers that feel both significant and attainable within your current capacity. Consider your progress measures as a form of internal communication, sending clear signals to your brain that your efforts are producing results. When designed effectively, these indicators trigger reward responses that make continued action feel natural rather than forced. This explains why some of the most dedicated practitioners in any field often report that their persistence requires less willpower than might be expected. They've created feedback systems that generate motivation through visible evidence of advancement. By deliberately crafting progress visibility into your most important pursuits, you transform the experience of sustained effort. What once felt like pushing against resistance becomes more like following an engaging path marked by clear signs of forward movement. This isn't just about tracking. It's about creating the conditions where motivation naturally emerges from evident advancement. Thank you for listening and for investing in yourself. I believe in you. Your potential is endless. Now go out there and create the life you deserve.